There has been a major legal skirmish between Google and Australia. Exactly what is it and what does it mean for you and users around the world? Well, to explain that, we have Daniel Van Boom from CNET and Natasha Gillezeau from the AFR. Natasha, exactly what is the conflict here between the ACCC and Google?
The ACCC, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission.
You're just showing off
just showing off for the crowd at this point. They sued Google over this thing where on Android devices, there was a two-step process to hide your location tracking data. One said location history, one said web and app activity. And what was going down was people were switching off location history, thinking like, cool, Google's not tracking my data or location anymore. But it came to light in a bunch of news media articles in about 2018 that actually there was this secret second step that you had to do to fully kind of turn off the collection and data issue. So ACCC got involved on behalf of Australian consumers and said, this is misleading. Google said, is it? ACCC said, yes, and we're going to take you to court over it. And they've basically won that case. So
why would you have to have a secret second level?
So the Associated Press reported on this first, and when that came out, apparently there was a, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this.
Assume not, no.
Okay. There was a OS word meeting in Google. That's what they called the meeting, the official meeting, reportedly, where they were like, oh, we didn't realize we did that. And then they fixed it. So with Google, there's no shortage of ill will. So you can say like, oh, they were just doing clever stuff to get as much data as possible. But it did sound like possibly it was just a situation where they didn't realize what they had done kind of thing. But also probably not.
So presumably this is a functionality that exists for Google internationally. Is that correct?
I believe they cut that, yes, but they cut it off in 2018 when the report came out.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around why there would have been a second layer in the first place. Was it just like it's a big complicated piece of technology and we didn't realize there were two levels, or is there something more to it than that?
That's more speculative in terms of the intention of Google, whether it was to sort of deliberately obfuscate the process and make it a little bit sneakier. I think they would say no. But in terms of generally speaking, how data has been collected by a bunch of these sort of big tech companies and smaller tech companies, they've definitely been flirting with historically in the last 5-10 years, like what can we get away with without freaking out users and consumers too much? And then there's been this pushback by whether it's the press, whether it's regulators, whether it's lawyers being like, this is not okay. You need to be much clearer in what you're doing. So I think that's more speculative rather than a known fact.
What exactly are the penalties for Google here, Natasha?
Technically, it's up to a fine of $1.1 million per breach. Which could potentially be like some insane fine, right?
Yeah.
But the next step in this case is the court will look at sort of the cumulative impact of how much consumers were harmed, Google's behavior, you know, whether Google made steps to ameliorate the situation or whether they went in on being a little bit sus.
Well, the ACCC is touting this as a world first in the sense of Google being taken to court for misleading customers, specifically on misleading data collection terms. And they're kind of hoping the hint of that is that other governments will take after the ACCC's lead.
Because I think it's overblown that this is some big world first. Because the thing is, like, it's actually pretty old school kind of case type to say, you lied to consumers, we're going to sue you and fine you for that. But the newness here is that it's around data. So that's kind of like what feels a bit fresh here.
I think what Google would have to be worried about in this particular case is that the EU is readying its Digital Markets Act, which sets out guidelines as to how these massive platforms deal with their consumers. And I think there is a possibility that the EU legislators will see this and say, hey, we should integrate some of that into the Digital Markets Act.
That's the reason why you have to click through,
Exactly.
yes, I will accept cookies, and you continue to not pay any attention whatsoever. You
so
can
maybe
blame Europe.
Exactly. Maybe the long term of this is it'll be a new wave of ClickUps that you have to click like, yes, okay, the data, I know.
All right, there's lots more of this in the podcast edition of Download This Show. We're also talking about that horrific Tesla crash and exactly what it means for the future of Tesla. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks.